Hey guys, and welcome back. Our next speaker is the founder and CEO of EAK Digital, a specialist blockchain PR agency. Prior to launching EAK Digital, he managed a large-scale project teams for blue-chip brands such as Nike, Rolls-Royce, Vodafone, successfully guiding his teams to multiple advertising awards, including the Platinum Award for Campaign Magazine. He continues to lead that journey with his PR agency for the blockchain industry. A speaker at global events, he's also the organizer and mastermind behind this virtual event. Please welcome Erhan.
Hey guys, thanks so much for sticking with us today. We're now on to my talk, which is the battle of the pitches, how to really win at blockchain PR. So right now, there's so many different blockchain PR agencies out there. How do you differentiate between the ones that are good and going to get you results and the ones that are bad? I'm going to offer some tips today that will help any professional, whether they're a PR agency or whether they're a marketing person on the client side, to help them get better results and to offer my tips, having run EAK Digital successfully, in the last 3 years and moving forwards, hopefully for many more years to come. So the email is not enough. So that's my next slide. Many people think you can just write a press release, send it out, and magically journalists will pick it up and publish something. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. I mean, I wish it did. It would make our jobs a lot easier, of course, but it just doesn't. Sending out emails is just like standing in a long line. And unless you already have a relationship with that journalist or the story really is incredible, it's very unlikely that you're going to get something picked up. Now, these journalists get hit up 100, sometimes 200, sometimes even more than that a day, depending on who they write for or what their media is. And you have to be really quite clever, as to how you identify those journalists, how you build a relationship with those journalists, and ultimately, how you provide value back to them, right? I mean, they get so many people hit them up every day. If you're somebody that's just a take person, without providing value, just like you would in real life, it's not really gonna get you far. I mean, ultimately, it's all in the name, right? Public relations is about relationship building. It's about helping each other. It's about giving them the stories, giving them exclusives. If you have a story and you give them an exclusive, of course you're going to build that relationship up with them, and ultimately that can build a strong relationship moving forwards, which can ultimately obviously give you much better coverage for you and your existing and future clients. So yeah, use unorthodox channels. Like we know, obviously, in crypto that everyone uses Telegram. So, of course, try and if you can, obviously, politely try and find out their Telegram is. Message them, obviously make them feel comfortable. But ultimately, don't badger them. Like the worst thing you can do is just keep pinging them. Especially like with question marks and things like that. These guys are really, really busy. They usually have deadlines getting things out the door. They're probably not ignoring you, to put it nicely, and they're probably just super, super busy. And if it is a story they're going to cover, they would get in touch with you. So another point would be obviously to just don't take it personally. Like it's just a numbers game sometimes, in terms of if they don't respond to you, it doesn't mean they don't like you, it doesn't mean they don't like your project. It just could be that there's more major news that day, and ultimately that is their job. So yeah, Telegram, Twitter. There's also some fantastic ways that you can target, different media using Twitter, for example. You can do searches for Twitter bios. There's tools out there that allows you to do, mixed search terms. So, you could look for a journalist that writes about crypto and also has, I don't know, let's say Manchester United, in his bio. I mean, I'm a big Manchester United fan. If I saw a crypto journo, who had a Manchester United bio, like, chances are we would get on pretty well. So, just finding that common ground, building that relationship without any real specific goal in mind. And then when you can provide value back to him or her, then that's fantastic. And don't forget, as PR people, sometimes people make out as if PR people always need from the journalists, but actually it's also in their best interest to build a great relationship with you, because ultimately you are the one that's feeding stories. And just like I always say to people now, don't be rude or, to a journalist just because they don't write for the best publication or they don't have the best social media, YouTube channel right now. You don't know where they're going to be one day, right? Like they could be 1 minute a lower tier publication, next minute get that huge promotion, and then suddenly they're going to remember the way you treated them when they were, a junior. It's really important to treat people with respect. Doesn't matter who they are, where they come from. They have friends, they talk to people. Or ultimately staying humble and doing your job professionally and diligently and being real is going to get you more results than you're sending out thousands and thousands of emails and spam. And yeah, as I put here as my second point, reach out on LinkedIn for a virtual coffee. Now, of course, journalists don't always have time for virtual coffees, and maybe you don't either. But it is nice. I mean, to be honest, in this lockdown phase, maybe they will have time. This is actually an excellent point. During the lockdown phase, more and more people are going to want that, communication right now. So actually, I think more and more people will be open for a virtual coffee. I mean, look, we're doing a virtual conference, aren't we? So, I mean, absolutely. I mean, just reach out to them. When I say reach out for a virtual coffee, just ask them, politely, so, I can see you write for this publication, what do you usually cover? What stories do you like? And it doesn't always have to be your client, right? Like, I mean, many times with the amount of journalists, that we're connected with, we are finding different opportunities for the journalists that are not even for our clients sometimes, right? I mean, like sometimes, like, hey, Erhan, can you get me a comment or a quote or an interviewee on this subject? And it's like, okay, we don't have any clients in that world. But having said that, we are very well connected. We know a lot of people. So yeah, I'm sure I can connect you to the right person. And that goes so much more further into cementing a relationship, like knowing that you're going to do something for them, than just being like, oh no, sorry, like don't have any clients on it, which is obviously perfectly fine. But ultimately, like, I always feel that you should go above and beyond, just in general in life, and you'll get that back to you. So moving on to the next slide, am I a PR or am I a blog post? So we get this a lot, right? Where clients, which fair enough, they obviously want to promote their internal announcements. So that might be that, XYZ from HR has been promoted to head of HR. We've opened a new, kitchen in our office, whatever it might be, might seem like a big deal to, to us, like in the office, but is it going to scratch the surface, on the outside world? A lot of the times it isn't. So what I said here is like, self-congratulatory posts suck. Now, you really have to put yourself in the journalist's shoes when you're pitching a story. I mean, even me, like as a PR agent, even though I'm not a journalist, I mean, I've written some articles that I've never been trained to be a journalist or an editor or anything like that. I always see myself as the kind of, what do you say? You're kind of the gateway, really, aren't you, between the journalist and the client? So I think it's very important to put yourself in the shoes of the journalist. I put myself in the shoes of the journalist and goes, would I write about this? If I wouldn't write about this, PR, what would make me write about it? What is the interesting angle that we can do to twig that editor? And I think it's really important as well, like as a PR agent, to feed that back to your clients, because, if your project's constantly fielding, rubbish, boring PRs, you're going to get a reputation for that. And if you're always giving them gold, you're also going to get a reputation for that as well. So really thinking deeply about your angles. Sometimes the story doesn't even have to be so interesting, but the hook could be really decisive. And, that could be based on the trends right now. Who knew that like there'd be so much media about virtual conferences a few months ago? Suddenly, Wired, Forbes, TechCrunch, all writing about virtual conferences because of the news cycle right now. So yeah, absolutely. Just really, really be careful about just throwing PRs out that ultimately probably should just be an internal memo or a blog post. I know you want to get your PR agency working, and that's fair enough. But I really think that really, really try and put things to work, in terms of finding the right angle. I would say some of those things can be maybe like a secondary point at the end of a PR rather than like the whole title, because look, you're not going to get great results if that's the case, and it's a little bit unrealistic to expect that, if the story isn't really that interesting for anyone outside of your company. Moving to the next slide, Okay, so next I got when Forbes, right? So I get this a lot, right? People come to me, hi EAK, we would love to get an article on Forbes or New York Times or TechCrunch, and it's like, okay, cool, of course, absolutely. So tell us more. Like, what is it that you do? What story are you trying to get out? Let's see if we can help you craft that, obviously, and get that message right, so we can actually get the attention of those mainstream journalists. And a lot of the time, some of the clients that are looking for these kind of like moonshot, shall we say, placements are ones that maybe aren't ready for that kind of coverage. And when I say you aren't ready, of course everyone wants to be on those publications, but if you get on a publication like that, chances are you're going to a very, very professional reporter, and it's not always the best thing if you have some skeletons in your closet in your project. Sometimes in the project you might have, I don't know, some internal politics in the past. Maybe your technology isn't quite what you say it is. I always say to clients when they onboard with EAK, what are the skeletons in your closet? Do you have any skeletons that won't leave this room? But we need to know that. I do think that obviously, if journalists can sometimes be quite sneaky, right? They can take your press release and pretend that they're going to write a story about it, but then they'll find something on your website, on a video, something you've said before. They could find something that will get them thinking. And a lot of journalists are, like naturally to be an investigative journalist, and like to look more and more into things, which is absolutely fair enough. It's their job. And if you have something that maybe hasn't been sorted out and hasn't been worked out in the past, you need to make sure that everything looks good, that everything looks good in the shop window. And if you've got broken parts, I can see it just at the back. That's really not you don't want to be shining a light as big as TechCrunch or Forbes through your window if you're not ready for it, because people will see those cracks in the glass through those lights. It is usually better to build up and get that momentum going, especially if you're not so used to being in the media or being interviewed by journalists. I think it's really important to get that experience and work your way up. Like if you're a professional footballer, if you're a young footballer, it's unlikely you're going to go in at 16 and start playing in the Premier League. Get the experience, get your fitness in terms of get used to speaking to journalists, get used to approving PRs, writing thought leadership articles, and work your way towards the top. Because when you are in the top, then you're in a much better position to win a title and obviously get that sparkling article. And don't forget, those articles or media placements, they're going to be on there for years, especially if we're talking a Forbes or TechCrunch or New York Times. Like the SEO value is worth your PR agency retainer for a month alone. Now, if you get an article on those sites, of course, then you just have to be really careful, because if it's a negative one, then that's going to be very difficult, for people to avoid when they're searching for your company. So really be careful about what you wish for. Obviously, not everyone has skeletons, and then that's fantastic. If we can go straight to Forbes, let's go straight to Forbes, absolutely. But, just be mindful, always be mindful when you're making these decisions, which could one day negatively impact your business if you're not careful. And then, the final point here is ask your PR agency to audit your project. Sorry. So what we do at EAK is every time we get a new client, we literally do an audit. So when we say we do an audit, we all put our journalist hats on, me and the rest of my team, and we look at the project through a very, very cynical mind, very cynical, like almost to the point where the client could find it offensive. But we do that obviously to help them. If we can build up their armor, and we can build up, and when we can help them sparkle, we can polish that as much as they deserve to be, as much as they should be, and help really get the shine out of that armor, then we should be doing that before we send it into battle. And I think any PR agency should be doing this. They should be doing, they should be finding gaps in your story, or gaps in your project. And I love doing that. I absolutely love doing it because it's really, really interesting. And then you can start being the journalist as a PR agent, which is also super fun. And a lot of the times, clients, sometimes they, projects, sometimes they don't realize it. And it's not because they're stupid. It's because they're so ingrained in the work that they do, and the company that they're in. They speak to the same people all the time that they don't always see that outside perspective. And something that I'd say, being a PR agency founder is that, because we work with so many different projects and different people, or have done at least in the past, it means that we've got a very unique perspective that we can provide our clients that otherwise can go missing in a company that's all worked together for a long time. Now, obviously, they have a strong bond, but they haven't maybe had the same perspective that an agency has, or work with such a wider range of media and messages and narratives that an agency can provide you. And I think that's really hard to put a figure on that, because that sometimes that can be the difference between an investment, a really huge piece that maybe attracts a great employee to work for you, or attracts projects to build on your platform. So it is really, really important to kind of keep that in mind if you're thinking about hiring a PR agency. The next slide, and I've touched on this a little bit already, but building mutual beneficial business. So like I said, finding win-win scenarios for journalists. They don't owe you anything, right? A lot of people think, and it's the same in the events industry, they think that everyone seems to have a God-given right that you owe them something, even though you don't know the person. Like, write about my project, write about, give me a speaking slot, whatever it is. Fine, if it's interesting, and it adds value to the audience, absolutely, of course. But if it doesn't, like I said, don't get offended by it. The journalists have editors that the newspapers pay any whatever the publication is, that pays their rent, so their wages and their rent. And ultimately they're not here to necessarily work for you. They're here to work for the publication. Those publications have goals, they have certain interests, they have certain angles, they have certain clicks they need to get. That's life. We have to help them do their jobs, and if we can do that, then everyone's happy, because the journalist is happy, because their editors are happy, we're happy because our client's happy, they got coverage, and who knows, that might lead to some clients for them, or developers to build on their platform, or whatever it might be. So really, really try and find those win-win scenarios. And the final bit is reduce the roadblocks to publication. So how can you make the journalist's life as easy as possible? So when I say this, when you're reaching out to journalists, sometimes it's even in the language. It's like, I can make my CEO available if you like things like that. Is just like, journalists are so busy. Like, don't make it sound like, you're going out your way to help them when ultimately they don't owe you anything. And when I say reduce the roadblocks, have a media kit, like have images, have quotes in most, if not all, of your press releases. Make sure the press releases are long enough. Make sure that the English has been expertly checked. Make sure they have all the data. If there's other things that you think might help them craft the article, link it at the bottom. Like, don't send them on a wild goose chase to get comments or data or whatever it might be. Give them what they need, and you've got a much better chance of getting published. Time to hit the skies. Well, this slide's a little bit outdated, of course. Definitely not time to hit the skies, but in general, it still holds. Attend conferences like this one. Conferences are a great way to meet journalists, great way to meet KOLs, or if they say in Asia, or opinion leaders, thought leaders. Always request a media list whenever you go to an event. Usually, an event organizer has hopefully a good media list of media attending. And if you want to pitch your project, your PR agency should be getting hold of that media list and setting you up with meetings way before you actually turn up. So set up those meetings for them, schedule those meetings for your clients, make sure that you're speaking to the right journalists, and ultimately remember that it's not all about that coverage there and then. Even if you've got no news, you can still say hello, you can still give them gratitude. You might be able to help them on a story that isn't about you. And as I said, it's about relationship building. And that's so important. So go to conferences. Obviously meeting people in person is really, really valuable. Request media lists, and just ultimately, don't hide behind your PC or your emails. Get out there and show people that you're a real person. And then the second point was work with agencies who attend the events. As I said, there's so many PR agencies out there. probably I see a few of them around, but not. It's usually the same ones, and those are the ones you want to work with, right? Those are the ones that have got so many fingers in their pies in the industry because they know everyone. They're exhibiting at conferences, they're organizing conferences. Those are the PR agencies that ultimately will provide the best value for you. They'll be able to arrange interviews because they probably already know the journalist. They'll be able to even give you, introductions to, who knows, potential investors, potential projects that want to build on your platform. Really could be really anything. Could be an advisor because they've been around a lot and they're always traveling a lot to different industry events. And that global network is really valuable to tap into. So the next slide I've got here is fail to prepare, prepare to fail. A good agency will obviously arrange you interviews. If you don't know about the interviewer, how can you give a good interview? So if an agency is just throwing you into an interview without even briefing you, like who they are or what the questions are or whatever the angle would be, that's a kind of a red flag. Just getting the media placement isn't like that. I mean, lots of companies can do that, but it's not about just getting the placement. It's about the angle. It's about getting the right tone of voice, getting the right message across, and making sure that lands exactly as you wanted it to land. So I say here, a great agency will brief you before your interview. So make sure your PR team or agency is giving you a real big briefing document or call before each interview, making sure that you are comfortable with who you're talking to, they've done their research, because ultimately getting interviews is great. But if you get, like right now, for example, if you're a government official and you live in the UK and you get an interview opportunity with Piers Morgan on This Morning, probably not a great idea because you're going to get grilled. And, ultimately, whilst a journalist at a publication might sound great, if you've been through their past stuff and a lot of it is, damning to cryptocurrency, when this happens a lot, especially in the mainstream space, where you think, oh, great, interview with, BBC. And then maybe it turns out to be like a piece about crypto scams or something similar. Those are not really the articles that you want to be in, of course. So really make sure you do your background research and you make your PR agency do that for you as well. 8, timing is everything. So, I would always say allow a minimum of 2 weeks preparation if you've got a major news piece to come out. It gives yourself the opportunity to make the most of it. It gives your PR agency time to obviously have those initial talks with journalists and media and influencers. And make sure and kind of warms up, you can warm up the right people for the campaign. You can also, take the temperature to see whether it is a bigger story as, your client thinks it is or you think it is, based on people's reactions. Now, of course, you might be thinking, oh, I don't want to share it because what if they, leak it? What if they leak the story? Now, ultimately, if they leak the story, like a PR agency should have relationships with journalists that they can trust to obviously not do that. I think that's also another reason why it's important to work with a PR agency that actually knows and has good relationships in the media, because we know that we know they're not going to leak the story because we have a relationship. If you just send out an embargoed press release to everyone, then that scares the hell out of me, because somebody will publish it. They don't know who you are. They don't care about you. They just want the clicks before anyone else. So really need to be careful about that. Get 2 weeks preparation, build it out, make sure you've got a nice mix, across different markets if that's what you want, different influencers. Make sure you're not just hitting the same, publications and influencers, the same audience all the time. It can be cross wires and less ROI on your effort. And then finally here, check the journalist time zones. Consider weekends. Now this is really interesting. So just to say, check the journalist time zones. Of course, if you're sending out a bulk email, for one, don't send out bulk emails. Like, client can do that, and you guys could do that yourself. We're not being hired to send out bulk emails. Like, we need to send out unique angles and pictures and something that we know by our relationships with that media that they would want to pick it up. And it's not just information that's freely available. So checking time zones is super important, simply because, if you're sending it at 9 a.m. in the UK, for example, to a journalist in New York, and it's 5 a.m. there or 4 a.m. there, chances are by the time they wake up at 9 a.m., they've got their Starbucks at the desk, you're already 50 releases or emails down below. You're not going to get picked up. So if you are sending those out, make sure you target it by region. And this same like I said, goes to, on the client side if you're a PR manager too. And consider weekends. Now, you know what? That was funny because I always thought, oh, weekend, no way, people are going to be too busy. Well, two things. We've got clients really successfully pitched at the end of a Friday, at the end of a Friday, and then turns out that our client had like the top story for the whole weekend, got way more hits than they would have done if they got on there on a Monday or a Tuesday, because the news cycle was turning a lot quicker. And also one other thing is that obviously the news doesn't stop during a weekend, and a lot of the time people stop pitching. Other agencies stop pitching. Our clients are enjoying their weekend. It's a good time to get your story in because media are looking for stories. That's really secret sauce there. Number 9, grass-fed, free-range PR, organic versus sponsored. Now, I say this a lot. I have lots of good friends, at publications, but obviously organic media is better. People can see and people can tell that if something's sponsored, it should be marked sponsored for a start. And as a casual reader like myself, if I see something marked sponsored, I usually don't think it's editorially worth anything and it's only in there because they've paid the money. So I tend to not read those articles. And obviously, working with a PR agency, it's up to them to get you those organic pieces. Now, I know some of the top media, especially in crypto, can cost up to nearly 1 Bitcoin to get an article placed, which is crazy. Like a PR agency should be able to get you 10 or 20 pieces for that amount with their agency retainer. So this is what I've put here: cost versus benefit. For the cost of one sponsored piece, you can expect to get 15 to 20 pieces from your PR agency. Finally, show your scars. Be real, be vulnerable, share your story. People want to deal with people. People don't want to deal with just press releases or computer-like responses. People ultimately invest in people, so no one likes to show off. Be open and honest, and people will respond to you, and you're going to do better in your PR and your outreach and get better results. Finally, do not brush mistakes under the table. Just 3 quick wins here. Do not brush mistakes under the table. Be honest, be open. If you make a mistake, own up to it. That really will build confidence in your project. Join the conversation in Twitter. Make sure you're building a relationship. Twitter's a great tool for that, especially during lockdown. And finally, if you haven't done this already, set up Google Alerts right now after this with your name, your company's name, and the keywords so you can join the conversation. Google Alerts is brilliant. Sends you that every single morning, and also means that you can check out the news cycle and make sure that you guys are commenting on any news that's interesting to your project. So finally, keep it short. One more, keep it really simple when you're doing a press release. Who, what, where, when should be in all of the PRs that you do in the first paragraph, just to give the journalists a really good understanding of what they should pick out from the press release. Don't leave it further down the article. Always have who, what, where, when. Then they'll decide, okay, I've read it. They usually skim PRs anyway. Make sure it's at the top. If it's good, they'll get back to you. Guys, that's all I've got time for. I've nearly run out of time today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Erhan Korhaliller. I'm the founder of EAK Digital. If anyone wants any good PR, hit us up. We'll do a great job. Thank you.
Erhan, thank you very, very much for that very insightful presentation. We have the biggest things coming up in the next few minutes. Stay tuned. We're going to go for a short break, and when we return, massive announcements coming your way at BlockDown 2020. So stay tuned.